Welcome back to the second video in my Star Wars reading project. Again, just to recap, my goal with this project is to delve deeper into the lore of the Star Wars mythology by reading through the books of the Star Wars canon in chronological order. And with every book I read, I'll release a video to highlight a moral lesson that I learned from each story. Last time we looked at the book Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void, and if you didn't catch that video, be sure to check it out. Today, we're going to take a look at the second book in the timeline, The Lost Tribe of the Sith by John Jackson Miller. Now, this book isn't a novel per se. It's a series of 8 short stories and one novella, I guess you'd call it, that are collected into one linear volume. And the events of this book begin about 5,000 years, I think, before Star Wars A New Hope. And the plot follows the exploits of a peripheral group of Sith that crash land on a remote planet called Kesh. And on this planet live the Kashiri. Now, the Kashiri, they're somewhat of a low-tech society. Okay, they're a group of sentient human-like beings. They have purple skin. And the Kashiri, they are artistic. They're religious people. And when the Sith landed on their planet, the Sith quickly took advantage of the Kashiri by claiming to be the sky gods of ancient Kashiri writings. And they tricked the Kashiri into submitting themselves to the rule of the Sith, and they tricked them into worshiping the Sith. And the story flows from there. Now, just as a bit of a background on the Sith are the ancient enemies of the Jedi. Like the Jedi, the Sith use the Force, okay? But unlike the Jedi, who submit themselves exclusively to the light side of the Force, the Sith give themselves over to the dark side of the Force. I talked about this in my previous video on Dawn of the Jedi, in which I discussed it's not good to give yourself exclusively to the light side. It's not good to exclusively give yourself to the dark side. What you want to do is you want to find a balance between the light side and the dark side of the Force. And if you'll remember from that video, the Sith, they tap into the power of the dark side by indulging their most basic and raw emotions like anger, aggression, fear, hatred, envy, greed, passion. You get the idea. The Sith shun the light side, and they shun the qualities that go along with it, the qualities of the Jedi, those qualities like order, self-control, patience, compassion, those sorts of things. And they instead give themselves over to those darker, more primal urges and emotions. Think of Darth Vader as a good example. Remember how he would kill his own men on a whim at the first sign of weakness or ineptitude of failure? He would just force choke them there to death. That's because Vader didn't really show much self-restraint. He submitted himself to the mindset and the philosophy of the Sith. And as a result, the dark side consumed him, okay? And the Sith don't really acknowledge the need for self-restraint. They see virtues like restraint, emotional restraint, self-control, a sense of integrity. They see these as shackles, not as benefits. They see these as chains that prevent them from achieving the one thing that they value the most in the universe, and that is power. Unlimited power and authority. The goal of the Sith is to rule. Every Sith seeks power over people, even each other. The main goal of every Sith is to rule and to lord their authority over the people underneath them. They don't give a whit about personal integrity. Integrity is a weakness as far as they're concerned. They don't care about the individual rights of others. They're not interested in living a peaceful life where everyone tends to his own business and meets his own self-interests and trades with his neighbors and treats others with respect. A society where everyone can live and let live. The Sith don't want any of that, okay? They don't really have this code of rational values to achieve. Again, I'm not an expert in Star Wars lore like somebody like Dave Filoni or somebody like that. I'm learning more as I go, though, and here, just from reading this book and seeing the Lost Tribe of the Sith in action, it seems the Sith aren't real interested in getting along with people, okay? They don't want to form a society with the people around them. They aren't interested in fostering a civil and free community. All right? They want a society where they are on top as absolute rulers, and everybody else exists to serve them and worship them. Because for the Sith, the purpose of life is power. It's the only way to live in a position of power if you're a Sith. And everyone else exists simply to feed their debased need, their debased lust for unlimited power. Like in this book, The Lost Tribe of the Sith, on the planet of Kesh, the Sith, they acknowledge the beautiful art of the Kashiri. They acknowledge their beautiful architecture. But what they don't do, they don't respect that beauty, okay? Instead, they destroy it, and they repurpose that beauty, and they redesign it for the sake of power. They take something that is beautiful and useful, and they deform it, and they deform it to reflect their deformed image, and they recreate it, and they use it to achieve power for themselves. Sentimentality, the appreciation of beauty and this sort of thing, sentimentality is not the way of the Sith. Everything is seen as a tool to be used, exploited, and discarded in their quest for power. When the Sith, what they would do is they would exploit skilled people that are skilled in things like commerce and industry, those skills that Sith Lords need. They need those skills most, but they never took the time to learn those skills, to develop those skills because of all their world building and all their destroying and all their plotting and all that stuff. They want power over people. They need that power over people. And not just power over people, their bodies and their property, but power over their souls. The Sith are a lot like Ellsworth Toohey in that way. Ellsworth Toohey is the antagonist of Ayn Rand's novel, The Fountainhead. And he and the Sith share a similar outlook. They have a similar mindset, a similar ideology. They have this sinister desire to rule men's souls. This is their primary reason for existing, to turn people into puppets, puppets that are subject to their control. Toohey and the Sith, they both operate with this perpetual cutthroat mindset. They acquire power, and then they maintain that power by stabbing people in the back, by manipulation, by indirect means like political schemes and internal corruption. And in regard to the Sith, they also use physical force to physically dominate the people around them and pound them into submission. Again, think of Emperor Palpatine, Darth Sidious, as a good example here. You see him in the prequels and in the Clone Wars using political machinations. He's playing each side against the other to consolidate absolute power for himself. And when his power is threatened, he's quick to whip out his lightsaber and his Force lightning in order to put down any threats that threaten his position of authority. People who think this way, people like the Sith or people like Ellsworth Toohey, they don't have any real creative spirit of their own, okay? They don't have any, like I said, any rational values to motivate them. They don't have a rational moral code, a code of ethics that they live by. All they have to motivate them and to guide them is their noxious sense of self-entitlement. And that sense of self-entitlement manifests itself in an unbridled lust for power. This desire for power, it's the crux of their weakness, the weakness of their ideology. No matter how much power a Sith can accumulate for himself, he's never satisfied. He's never content. Now, he'll never be truly happy. He can't be, because no matter how much power he gets, he wants more, and he wants more. And that's the Achilles heel of the Sith ideology. They need other people to gratify that lust for power. They need people to rule. They need other people to feel good about themselves. And that means they require the subservience of other people in order to have a healthy self-esteem, or a sense of self-esteem, I should say. They need other people to rule in order to feel good about themselves. And this makes the Sith a prime example of what the philosopher Ayn Rand would call a second-hander, okay? A second-hander is someone who lives his life through other people. A second-hander can't find happiness within himself. He can't find his motivation and contentment within himself. A second-hander needs the approval of other people. He needs the sanction of other people to be content, to feel good. A Sith can't manufacture his own happiness without someone to rule. He has to have other people to rule. That means he needs other people to provide him with the self-esteem that he can't manufacture on his own. They live second-hand lives. They live second-hand from the power that they have over others. They're not independent. They are completely dependent. The Sith ideology is a dependent ideology. They can't produce self-respect on their own. They can't do that independently. They need others. They depend on others to establish their self-worth. The book said that the purpose of being a Sith is the exaltation of the Sith, but that's not accurate. That's not true. The exaltation of the self. Now, the book said that the purpose of being a Sith is to exalt the self, but that's not correct. The truth is, anyone who adopts a Sith mindset degrades the individual self. Okay? To be a Sith, one has to renounce their individuality and embrace the supremacy of the collective. To quote from the book, no Sith saw any single life as precious, but their species as a whole certainly was. To quote Sith Master Nagasato, a Dark Lord of the Sith, he said regarding his Sith brethren, the greatest thing your kind can aspire to is competence in my service. And that is what I demand of you. Your work will create my glory. And he's basically saying here that the individual Sith have no right to the products of their own labor. The individual Sith can't work for their own self-respect and their own happiness. They have to work to create glory for Nagasato. And notice here the weakness of Nagasato. He can't work hard and create his own glory. He needs others to work to create his glory for him, as he said. To truly exalt the self, to respect the self would be a better way to say it. To respect the self, one has to first have a self. And the Sith ideology does not possess a correct concept of the self because they live within others, okay? As Howard Rourke would say. Now, Howard Rourke is, of course, the protagonist of Ayn Rand's novel, The Fountainhead. And you can pretty much take his dialogue from his conversation with Gale Wine, and you can take the subject matter of that dialogue, you can move it from the fictional universe of the Fountainhead and drop it right here a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away into the Star Wars universe, and it applies directly to the Sith. I mean, think about it. What is the aim of every Sith? Power. Power over people. What are their primary values? Authority and control over others. What emotion do most, if not all, Sith have in common? Envy. They feed upon the envy of others. They get a charge out of watching others squirm and scowl with envy. They build their lives on the backs of other people, on the shoulders of other people. Others dictate their actions. Others dictate how they feel about themselves, their self-esteem. The Sith don't know how to build anything on their own. They don't really know how to create. All they want to, and they don't want to learn, okay? They don't want to learn how to produce. They only want to take. All they're concerned with is power, and they want to take from others. They don't want to build, but they want to steal, okay? They don't want to lead. They want to rule. The perfect Sith must control everything and everyone, as one of the Siths said in the book. This second-handed nature of the Sith is the root of their evil mindset. They have no concept of the self. They have no idea what it means to be an individual. They derive their self-respect from the amount of authority they have over others. They don't build much on their own, okay? Instead, what they do is they plot and they scheme to assume authority over something that someone else has built. Okay, they want to take something and exercise authority over something that is not their own. And this way, the Sith sound a lot like these social justice warriors that plague our society today. Look at the comic book industry for an example. These SJWs, they don't want to work hard and build something on their own. They don't want to work hard and build their own characters. They don't want to work hard and produce their own intellectual properties. Instead, what they want to do is they want to scheme and plot and assume control over the hard work of others, the intellectual property of others, the characters that other people have created. These SJWs want to take those for themselves and, like the Sith, deform them and repurpose them to reflect their own deformed image. They prefer to seize the work of other people and to appropriate it for themselves. They want to invade, okay, and they want to establish their own superiority, much like the Sith. And they're both the Sith and the SJWs, they're total second-handers. In fact, the Sith, it would be appropriate to say, the Sith are the SJWs of the Star Wars universe. If you want to see what a progressive, collectivist, bureaucratic, social justice regime would look like, then look no further than the heavy-handed rule of the Sith in the Star Wars universe. Like Howard Rourke would say, the Sith, they have no concern for facts. They have no concern for ideas or values or principles or productive work. Their only concern is obtaining power over other people. Again, they don't want to build, they want to steal. They don't want to create, they want to take, and then they want to flaunt their authority. And this sort of behavior testifies to the emptiness of their second-handed souls. They can't really exalt the self because, like I said, they have no self. They have no independence. They have no individuality. The only virtue in the mind of a Sith is in the service to their race, to the group. Let all sacrifice and none profit, save for the select few who don't work to create anything of real value, but those who manipulate their way to the top. They only want to plot, and they only want to scheme, and they only want to stand. They want to knock others down so they can stand on the backs of other people and lord their authority over them and then act like they've accomplished something. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 20, in verses 25 through 28, Jesus said that no man will ever achieve a great life if he goes around lusting to have power over other people. Again, Jesus is not condemning ambition here. There's nothing wrong with having a rational ambition. Okay, there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a great life. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be a great man. There's nothing wrong with wanting to accomplish great things and do great at your job and do great at the things that you do. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But what Jesus is saying here is that anybody who wants to be great, he mustn't look to rule other people. Instead, he must work hard and provide a good service for his fellow man. And these are the people who will be truly great. In these verses, the disciples, what they were doing, they were kind of jockeying for positions of authority in the future kingdom, and they were arguing over who would be regarded as the greatest. And Jesus heard their discussion, and then he called the disciples to them, and he said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be your slave, your bondservant, even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Now, what Jesus is saying here is that anyone who wants to be a great man or a great woman, anybody who wants to live a great life, needs to stop looking for a throne to sit on and instead needs to go out and get to work. Anybody who wants to have a great life needs to go out and put his hands to good use, earning his own self-respect by engaging in productive work that benefits himself and the people around him. A servant, in this context, is not just some hired hand. A servant is someone who produces an edifying service, a service that builds up, a service that lifts up. A bondservant or a slave, it's not what we think of as a slave today, okay? When we hear the word slave, we tend to think of someone who's been kidnapped and taken against his will, someone who's put in chains and then put to work for no pay. A slave, a bondservant, as Jesus is referring to here in this context, is someone who exercises a sole commitment to another person. Paul describes himself as a slave to the gospel and as a slave to Jesus Christ. Jesus set the example for us when he emptied himself, okay? And he took on the form of a servant by being born in the likeness of men, as Paul said in Philippians 2. This use of the word slave in this context, the context of Jesus' statement here in Matthew 20, when he said that whoever would be great must first be a slave or a bondservant. He's talking about being someone who is committed to living a life of devotion first to God, and then you keep that first command to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then you work hard to meet that second command, a life in which you love your neighbor and yourself properly. In the real world, that looks like a life where you voluntarily take on the great responsibilities, okay, of sustaining your own life, of achieving your own values, of really loving yourself, of earning your self-respect, of providing for your family and producing good services. You love your neighbor by producing good services that benefit society and make the world a better place. A society in which you trade good for good with the people around you, with your neighbors. I mean, after all, one of the best ways a man can love his neighbor is by producing a service that edifies and lifts up the people around him. And Jesus offered himself here, as he always did, as the example. When he said here in Matthew chapter 20, that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, he lets the disciples know that if anyone has a claim to authority, it's him. He is God the Son. He is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the ruler and creator of all existence. Yet Jesus' mission on this earth wasn't to come and lord his authority over humanity. He came as a devoted servant to serve and give himself and his life to earn something of great value to him. And that would be us, our lives. He came to work for and earn something that we could not earn ourselves, and that's our salvation. He came to earth to work. He came to accomplish his goal of achieving his own glory by keeping the law and by atoning for the sins of his people, to liberate us from the tyranny of sin, death, and the devil, and to set us free and give us the gift of eternal life with him in his kingdom forever. If Jesus came not to be served, but to serve, if he came to do productive work, then we would be wise to follow in his example. Jesus is God, okay? He's not a second-hander. He's not somebody who is dependent, okay? He has no weaknesses. He doesn't need anything from anyone. He is totally self-sufficient. And unlike second-handers, he is perfectly capable of working and earning his own glory. A person who follows the example of Christ is the one who makes the moral choice to live a productive life. And he does that not by being a second-hander, but by living a life of self-reliance. Now, don't misunderstand what I mean here when I say self-reliance. Like I explained in my book, Manhood as a Mindset, self-reliance is not kicking God to the curb and trying to live your own life in your own way by your own power. That's foolish, okay? That kind of behavior is self-defeating. It's not self-reliant. A wise man understands that apart from God, he can do nothing. Yet with God and through God, he can find success in every single job he was put on this earth to do. A self-reliant man lives an independent life. He understands that God created him for his sovereign purposes, for God's sovereign purposes. He knows, therefore, that God has given him all the tools he needs to accomplish those purposes. Therefore, in every area of his life, he works with God, not without him, because he understands that apart from God, he can do nothing. An independent man is self-reliant, not because he works alone or because he makes his own way, but because he holds himself personally responsible for doing the jobs that God has called him to do. He knows his personal limitations. He knows he has weaknesses. He knows that he's a man of strengths and weaknesses. He knows his personal limitations, and he's not afraid to ask for help when he really needs it. But he never, ever feels entitled to anyone's help. And never, ever does an independent man outsource his responsibilities to someone else. Now think of it this way. God has blessed me with the responsibility of being a husband to my wife. He has blessed me with the responsibility of being a father to my children, a pastor to my church. And I act with self-reliance when I don't try to live through others or live by the power of others or farm out my God-given responsibilities to someone else. It's not someone else's job to be a husband to my wife. That's my job. It's not someone else's job to be a father to my children. It's mine. That's my job. It's not someone else's job to protect and to provide for my family. That is my job. An independent man, a self-reliant man, can ask for help when he really needs it, but he never ever expects anyone to do his work for him. Instead, he follows God's leadership. He follows the example of Jesus Christ, and he uses his God-given talents to do the work that God has given him to do. He doesn't try to live through others like some sort of second-hander. He doesn't try to step on the backs of other people like some sort of second-hander. He doesn't try to rule over men like some Sith. A real man, an independent man, he works hard to meet his responsibilities. He works hard to live a productive life and to trade good for good with the people around him. He lives his life for God's glory. And he lives his life to achieve his own personal values and earn his own self-respect. And in the process, he earns true and lasting happiness. And he doesn't need other people to give it to him like some second-hander, because he's man enough to go out and earn it for himself. If you like this video, then let's trade some good for good, and please subscribe to the channel and give the video a thumbs up if you think I've earned it. Also, be sure to check out my book, Manhood as a Mindset, Fatherly Instruction from the Wisest Man Who Ever Lived. In the book, I point my son to the example of Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, and I instruct my son in the fatherly wisdom that Solomon taught his son in Proverbs chapters 1 through 9. The book is a text-driven exposition that follows Solomon's lead and reads as a personalized discourse, as a series of letters from a father to his son. It's a good read for fathers and for sons alike, so be sure and check it out. It's available on Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, and ChristianBook.com. I'll put a link in the description below. Until next time, I hope you have a great week and a happy Thanksgiving. Take care.